Ansel Adams is a great photographer to study during this experimental watercolor technique unit because of his landscape paintings. They transfer very well into these techniques that you're going to be using. Ansel Adams, the man behind the mountains, and he says, "A true photograph need not be explained, nor can it be contained in words." He was famous for traveling out west. He lived some of his life in California, actually a lot of it in Arizona, New Mexico, places like that, and photographed these areas, bringing them back to the east so really people could see, you know, the grandeur of the western part of our country. Let's move on here. There he is. As you see, he was born in San Francisco in 1902, which means as he was becoming a young man, what was going on in the country? The Great Depression, right? He was friends with, you'll see coming up here, Depression area photographers, people who documented what was going on in the country during the Great Depression, documented the people and the farms, the Dust Bowls, things like that. As you can see, he first visited Yosemite in 1916, and he writes, "The splendor of Yosemite burst upon us, and it was glorious. One wonder after another descended upon us. There was light everywhere. A new era began for me." He really found his calling in making photographs. Oh, this is just a little side view, little side note here about his nose. When he was 4 years old in San Francisco, he, was living there during the great earthquake and of 1906. He wasn't injured in the actual earthquake, but an aftershock threw him headlong into a wall, and he broke his nose, and it became crooked, or it was crooked the rest of his life. Okay, let me go back here. Just, for those of you, maybe this will give you some kind of motivation and comfort here. He was a very, very poor student. Actually, he only went up to about the 8th grade. He got an 8th grade diploma, and when he became, a famous photographer throughout the world, where did he hang his diploma? He hung his 8th grade diploma in his guest bathroom. That's how much he thought of formal schooling. All right. He began to experiment with photography when he first went to Yosemite in 1916. This image here is one of his very most famous photographs, the monolith, the face of Half Dome. Okay. He was also a very accomplished piano player. He was a piano teacher, but the problem was his hands were so small that he would never become a full-blown concert pianist. So he, took his time and directed his efforts towards photography. Okay, you can see who he's friends with here: Alfred Stieglitz, Georgia O'Keeffe, a very famous painter, Dorothea Lange. There is Georgia O'Keeffe, and these are the paintings that Georgia O'Keeffe makes. Maybe you've seen them. She does a lot of flowers, a lot of southwestern landscapes. Dorothea Lange, if you haven't seen this photograph, I don't know where you've been for the past 100 years, because this is one of, the world's most famous photographs, Migrant Mother, taken by Dorothea Lange. But so who did Ansel Adams influence? Okay, he was in this group of artists and photographers who, as much as they influenced him, he influenced them. As you can see here, we're talking about composition again. This Jeffrey pine. The tree is framing the mountains, okay, with what, guys? The rule of thirds, okay, combination of branch and rocks. As you look at his images, think, what experimental watercolor techniques could I use to display or portray the elements in these photographs? Here's the famous quote from our anticipatory set: "You don't take a photograph, you make it." He would spend days, weeks, months traveling, sleeping in his car, and you'll see his car coming up here. There it is, Woody, okay? He had this stand so that he could set up the light. He would use filters and timing and just visualizing what things would look like. Okay, one of his most famous photographs, Moonrise, Hernandez, New Mexico, taken in 1941. Okay, it's really an anomaly because he had to capture this right before the light started to fade, and he used the luminance of the moon itself to set the exposure on his film. There's a lot of science, a lot of experimentation behind his photographs, which make them really unrepeatable, unique, one of a kind. I'm just going to let you read this here. I don't think I have to read this for you. Okay. He set himself problems. Okay. Oh, he went to the Carlsbad Caverns, and you can see the images that he obtained there. Okay. What kind of watercolor techniques would you use if you were to paint these images? You can read this. Both photos show extreme contrast in color. What do you notice, though? There's really no color. It's all a grayscale, black and white. Want to know Yosemite. Okay. And you can see just these lovely, gorgeous, you know, the mountains become really huge, huge statues, don't they? They're just impenetrable, and but the light, the timing, it's all one of a kind. Okay, your challenge here, and I'm going to explain this in the next chapter as well. You are to select an Adams landscape from which to make a monochromatic painting. Monochromatic means one color. So let's say you pick red. You can take red, and inside that red you could mix white, a little bit of black, not too much, and browns, any of the neutral colors. You could also mix up your own grays by combining complementary colors such as orange and blue, and then mix that into the red. And I want you to make a monochromatic homage, really a copy of one of Adams' paintings. You should use in this painting at least 5 of the experimental techniques that we learned about this week. For example, you might use what? Salt, plastic, lifting. You might use a wash for the background, and something else, perhaps alcohol. Okay. Don't use straight black watercolor. Mix your very own grays like we just talked about. Okay. Now, how are you going to find an image? Well, I'm going to have a whole slew of them here in the next chapter, or you can do an online image search for Adams black and white photographs. Okay. You will use a good piece of stretched watercolor paper. As far as composition, these have already been composed for you. So really you don't have to, unless you want to zoom in or zoom out on your own, which is totally an option, you don't have to worry too much about composition. The objective of copying an Ansel Adams photograph is, first of all, to really have a beautiful landscape when you're finished with this, as well as use your experimental techniques. Well, I hope you enjoyed looking at some of his photographs, and you can proceed now to the next chapter where I will have these Ansel Adams images. Thank you very much.